Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahavitam Karavahe Svinavadhitamastu Mavidvishavahe. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Let there be peace, harmony and joy in the hearts of all of us. Om peace, peace, peace. So today's subject is spiritual awakening in everyday life. Now, I am going to give a Vedantic perspective of what life and what or how we look up and interpret. Now, Vedanta says that at the very beginning of our evolution, spiritual evolution, we look upon this visible empirical world of senses as the only reality. Just as children may consider a chocolate as the best and most wonderful thing, most desirable thing. Similarly, those who are at the very beginning of spiritual evolution may think about whatever enjoyment can have in this world, and our body, the physical body, as the only entity, as the only reality. As I said, just as small children may consider a chocolate or a candy as the best thing, that the most desirable thing that we can think of. But as we evolve in our life, not necessarily in spiritual life, but even in intellectual life, as we get better education, as we study maybe philosophy, literature, we evolve a more mature, maybe a higher concept of life and world. If you ask a scientist and if you tell him that this physical empirical world is absolutely real, is eternal, is unchanging, is the only reality, he won't admit it because he knows it is changing. The cosmos, the universe came into existence with Big Bang, if you believe in that, and may change into something else after a few more billions of years. So the universe, the cosmos itself, just in time, and it may change into something else in the future after billions of years. So this intermediary stage is what we call existence. And according to Vedantic perspective, anything that is subject to changes is not absolutely real, but not absolutely unreal. So it is relative. It is not absolutely unreal. So often there is you come across this serious misunderstanding about Vedanta and Indian philosophy in general. The world is a dream. The world is unreal. Such ideas you come across in many translations, mostly in the translations of those who have not studied original Sanskrit works. The world is not absolutely unreal. If it were absolutely unreal, we won't feel it, we won't experience it. If it were absolutely real, then it will remain the same without any change for billions and billions of years. And if there is going to be global warming, the structure, the nature of the world in which we live may change. It's not unreal, but not absolutely real. So this is the second stage of evolution. Highly evolved, intellectually grown-up people will look upon this world as something that is neither absolutely real nor absolutely unreal. So in Vedanta, it is called, there is a technical term called anirvachaniya, which means inexplicable, indescribable, something that cannot be defined as this or that, something that cannot be definition of this mystery of life in one of the well-known Ubhayatmigano, Sangapi, Asamgapi, Ubhayatmigano, Mahadbhuta Anirvachaniya Rupa. The last word is, this is a great mystery, the great wonder, the great non-describable or indescribable, inexplicable thing which is neither absolutely real nor absolutely unreal. Now, I was quoting from a verse from one of the well-known Vedantic texts of Shankaracharya, who lived in the century. Like two great passages in his commentaries, which are supposed to be among the most celebrated philosophical statements by great thinkers, not only great Indian philosophers like Radhakrishnan, Vivekananda, but also by great modern European scholars like Paul Deussen and British scholar MacDonald, Keith, Windenitz, and many others. Max Muller quotes this many times, and says this is one of the greatest descriptions of what life is and what the world is. So I shall quote this. So these are two stages. Then there's a third stage, which I will explain now. Buddha in Sanskrit means the enlightened one. So when you reach a very high level of spiritual enlightenment, either as a philosopher or as a mystic or a devotee, great mystics who lived in medieval Europe, for example, who spent their whole lifetime on contemplation and prayer, who looked upon God as the only reality. For them also, this world is a city of this world can be re-experienced only when we recognize the existence of something which is not relative. See, the relative is incomprehensible except when you contrast it with something which is absolute. Waking stage cannot be understood. We don't recognize waking state as waking state unless you contrast it with the dream state. Darkness cannot be comprehended properly if there was no such thing as white or other colors. So similarly, relativity of this world can be only non-relative. What is the experience when you reach the absolute? By one supreme spiritual reality. One of our ancient scriptures explains how a devotee of God or a great philosopher will feel when he reaches that high level of spiritual evolution. Sarva bhudeshu yapashit bhagavad bhavam atmanaha bhudani bhagavadi atmani esha bhagavadottamaha. When you reach that level of spiritual experience, we call it mystical experience. If you want to get an idea of what it is like, you can read Pilgrim, where that semi-illiterate ceasing prayer from a Russian Orthodox monk, and when he mastered the art of being always in a state of natural prayerfulness, he felt the whole universe as pervaded by Jesus. and he could experience the presence of Jesus in those whom he met when he was traveling. He was, of course, I don't have time to go through that particular passage. So after he mastered the art of unceasing prayer, as it mentioned in the Saint Paul's epistle to the Corinthians, and which he mastered from a Russian Orthodox monk accidentally who met him there. And then when he reached that stage, he felt the whole universe pervaded by the divine presence of Jesus. So God is not something that we pray to, that we think about, but we contemplate upon once a week. God is something that we experience every moment of our life. When every act becomes an act of worship, every thought becomes a meditation, and the whole world appears to be pervaded by the divine. This is exactly what Scripture says. Bhuda When you reach that stage, you not just believe in, but you experience the presence of God in your heart, and also the presence of the same God everywhere, in other people's hearts also. The problem is, we realize we are divine, but others have to follow our path to realize this truth. Then only there is a problem. So the highest man or woman of spiritual evolution is one who sees God everywhere and who sees everything in God. That's the stage of evolution. At that stage, we live in this world, but the whole perspective changes. Everyday obligations and duties and responsibilities. The burden, the strain of our everyday work will not upset our mind, will not be a big strain in our mind, because we will be able to look upon our life and also this world from a higher transcendental perspective. And that completely transforms the way we look and interpret ourselves, our life, and this world. This is what is called spiritual awakening. Now, the ancient verse which I am quoting right now was written by a It is called Gaudapada Kariga. Kariga means an interpretation in metrical form. It is a commentary on one of the famous Upanishads. The Upanishad itself has got only 12 verses, but the commentary has got 215 verses, which you can get in the YouTube. We're taking classes stage by stage in the old temple before we started the renovation. Now the verse is this: Anadi Mayaya Supto Yatha Jiva Prabuddhade This is the central, it is the genesis of this idea of spiritual awakening in Vedanta. The statement is this: we are all stupor. When we wake up, then we suddenly realize that our residential address, our identity card needs to be changed. Because our true nature is not this body mechanism that lives for maybe 100 years, maybe 6 feet tall, 200 pounds heavy. This physical mechanism is only the grossest and in fact the most significant dimension of our true personality. When this awakening comes, we suddenly realize that we have a transcendent spiritual dimension of our personality. Real recognition of this spiritual dimension of our personality is called spiritual awakening. So, the verse says, we are sleeping under the influence of Maya. So, Maya I already mentioned. In fact, at the very beginning of the lecture, I said, a spiritually enlightened person recognizes this world as something relative, not eternal. But the relativity of the relative could be properly understood. So when this awakening comes, what happens? We realize we were sleeping. You never realize that you are sleeping before you wake up. When we are asleep, we don't recognize we are sleeping. The fact that we are spiritually asleep is recognized only when we awaken in spiritual life. And then we recognize the fact physical or intellectual dimension, this psychophysical mechanism that worries when the stock market collapses, becomes anxious when the banks collapse, which interprets everything in this world in terms of a few dollars gained or lost. This is only a very, very insignificant empirical dimension of our personality. The real I goes far beyond all this. This is called spiritual awakening. Now, for those of you who are interested, because Buddhism is becoming very popular here, some of the greatest statements on this Pali text that is called Sutta Pitaka. The three Pitakas mean the three baskets of Buddhist philosophy: Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka. Most of the great philosophical statements from Buddha are found in Dhammapada, which is the condensation of some of the most profound philosophical teachings of Buddha. So Buddha says in his original Pali text, of course Buddha did not write, Buddhist teachings were they were compiled in Pali script. It's called Pali canonical literature. So Buddha makes a statement about the spiritual awakening and spiritual sleep. He says, Sambuddham prabhujjanti sada geetamasavaka yesam divanarattu cha bhavanaya ratu mano. This is Pali. Pali is, at the best we can say, is a non-refined, unrefined, a primitive form of Sanskrit. Its Sanskrit form is more simple. suprabuddham prabudhyante sada gautama sravaka yam divacharatu cha bhavanayam ritam manah. The meaning is very simple. Buddha speaks about how his followers get this spiritual awakening. The disciples of Gautama are ever well enlightened and wide awake. So in the Karika, Manduka Karika, Anadi Maya Supta means we are in a state of long stupor, spiritually asleep. When we wake up, what happens? Our mind constantly seek pleasure in meditation. So this concept of spiritual awakening is the very basis of not only Buddha's teachings but his own. Used, Buddha, the word means in Sanskrit the enlightened one. Buddha became enlightened because he came out of this sleep. And he could come out of this sleep because he could worry about others. That was the very beginning of Buddha's awakening. He was born a prince, and then he was not allowed to come out of the palace. He was living with some astrologers predicted that this boy may become a mendicant, which his father didn't like, who was a king. So he was forcibly he came out of his palace. He was 28 years old, and his charioteer, his horseman, the servant, took him along the streets, and he happened to see the face of a sick person, an old, frail, old, aged person, and also the procession of a person who had died, a procession of a funeral procession. And finally, he also saw a person. That's how he suddenly realized this luxury, this palace, all this cannot give us give walked for 900 miles, went to Bodhgaya, sat under a tree with a strong determination, strong will. Well, I won't get up from the sea till I get the highest spiritual enlightenment. And Buddha again says, Supabuddham prabujyanti sada gautama savakaha yesham divachadatto chahimsayam rato mano. This is again Pali, which is the script in which Buddha's preachings, which he originally did in vernacular, were written down in Pali canon. So the Sanskrit form is much more intelligible. It says, Suprabuddham prabudhyante sauda gautama savakaha. Yesham cha divoratro cha bhavanayam ratam mani. So, the one who completely meditates on ahimsa, himsaya in Pali, ahimsaya means Sanskrit. The one who completely meditates upon non-violence alone can reach the idea of spiritual awakening modern spiritual literature goes back to Buddha's teachings in Prakrit language. Now, how do we really awaken? How do we realize, how do we change our perspective of our own life and this world? There is a famous verse and a commentary in the Mandukya Karika Bhashya. I want to quote this because I want to make it clear that these ideas are ancient Vedanta ideas. For many years. You know, he uses a simile. So that's what we are going to deal with now. How we change our perspective in life. The verse is this: Vibhudim prasavam tu anne manyante srishti chintakaka supnamaya sarupedi srishtiranne vikalpida. So there are those who think that this world is magnificent. The big shops, the wonderful things to eat, the wonderful gifts of all the comforts that technology gives us. These are the most wonderful, desirable things in this world. Interpret life and world. Just as a little child looks upon a candy as the most wonderful thing in this world. So also, before we start our spiritual evolution, we think a healthy body, an organic food, a good bank balance, and all the comforts. These are the most wonderful things, nothing beyond this. Now, those who are spiritually evolved things as a dream. Dream here means not totally unreal, but something relative that comes and goes. That's the meaning here. This idea is interpreted with the help of a most unlikely analogy, that is an Indian rope trick. So the passage is very famous. Vibhuti vistara ishwarasya srishtiditi. Srishti chintaha manyante. Ishwarasya srishtihi iti means. So all this wonderful world, luxury, food, all this. God is one good, plenty of money, a good bank balance, and finally takes us to heaven where we continue to enjoy the same thing. This view is the view of those who are at the most primitive level of the spiritual evolution. Srishti Chintaka means this. But then, those who are much more highly evolved, they also have to eat food. They also need to live in this world. But even while living in this world, doing their duty, making money, and that's the line of demarcation, wisdom and just knowledge. They will have the wisdom to understand these physical comforts, this money, this wealth, all these are only relative, not eternal. They will come, they will go. They cannot give us absolute bliss or eternal joy or happiness. The Paramartha Chintaganam Srishtu Adara Nah means Nadu Paramartha Chintaganam Srishtu. That means those who think of the highest, the transcendental, they don't care. See, as I gave you the example, from most unlikely setting, the pilgrim in the way of a pilgrim, when he mastered the art of ceasing prayer, spiritual bliss and ecstasy, he didn't worry about anything else. His mind was focused on God. Nahi mayavinam sutramakashe nikshipya tena sayudhamaruhya chakshus gojaradam atitya yuddhena khandasacchinnam padidam punaruthidam cha pashyadam takkridamayadis sadattachintayam adaro bhavati tathayvayam mayavinaha sutraprasaranasamah supta prasupna the vikasas tadarudhamaya bisamascha tarstaha prajna taijasadi Tradharudhabhyam Anyaha Paramartham Maya Chinno Adrish Paramarthaya Sa Eva Bhumishtu Maya Chinno. If you want to read about this, if you go to Google, you will get plenty of explanation of this. Because this description goes all the way to Al-Biruni, was an Arab traveler who came to India maybe in the 10th century AD. You find Marco Polo's travels, and you find there are innumerable Western writers have written about this. This analogy is taken to expound a great philosophical, spiritual truth. That's the uniqueness of this passage. So, a number of people have gathered. Maybe it may be in the presence of a big emperor or a king. He throws a rope to the sky. And then he claims there is a call from heaven. These demons are attacking heaven. So there is an SOS coming from heaven. I have to go there and help them, the angels, the gods. So this is how it looks like. So a war is going on in heaven. It is the illusion that is created. I mean, this is the whole background of this Indian rope trick. The magician comes, thousands of people are gathered, including the king, and he proclaims that suddenly now he has received a request from heaven to help the gods or angels, because an army of demons is attacking the heaven. So I should go and rescue them, help them. The magician makes the proclamation. Then he brings a long rope and he throws to the sky, and the rope doesn't fall. He remains in vertical position. Then he says he's climbing the rope, and he slowly climbs and he vanishes. After some time, dead bodies start falling. Human limbs, hands, broken skulls. Illusion that a big war is going on in heaven, a big battle is being fought, and people are dying. After some time, maybe it could last several, maybe 1 hour, maybe more. Suddenly you find everything is gone, the magician is standing there. This is the background of Indian rope trick. Now, the point is here, magic is an illusion, unreal. But the magician is a real person because he was case, when all religions are going on, when people are under the wrong notion that a big battle is being fought in the heavens, actually the magician is standing somewhere else, a little away, maybe enjoying the whole game. That is Shankaracharya says, Tathayvayam. So, Tathayvayam Mayavinaha Sutra Prasarana Samaha Sushupta Swapnadi Vikasas Tadaruda Mayavi Samascha Tatstaha. So, Paramartha Mayavi Sa Eva Bhumishto Mayachanno Adrishyamana Eva Sthidaha. In fact, the magician is standing somewhere, but you don't see the magician when you are led to believe in the reality of the magic. You cannot believe in the reality of magic, the illusion. Magician is invisible. And finally, visible only when all these illusions come to an end. Similarly, when we are living in this world, struggling hard, working hard, just to make money, just to increase physical comforts, under the wrong notion that these physical comforts, this wealth, name, all this can give us eternal joy, spiritual bliss. That there is nothing beyond this. At that point, we are in a state of spiritual stupor. It could happen in so many different ways. You may read a book, that could be the beginning of waking up. You may listen to a great lecture. Or it could even take the undesirable forms of few knocks, setbacks, tragedies in life. They also can catch you by the throat and force you open your eyes. But a wise person is he who doesn't wait till the destiny takes a huge hammer and gives his he who wake up before the blow comes. So this is the interesting passage. So here, all these efforts, this rope, climbing, and then all the other wrong illusions that we are led to believe in, all these are real at that split moment, maybe a few seconds, when we are seeing this magic. Similarly, when we are living in this world thinking that this will make me happy, we don't see the magician. And when we see the magician, then we don't care for the magic. We know it's all trick. Awaken, when we open our eyes and look around, then suddenly we realize that you are sleeping. Before waking up, we don't realize we are sleeping. But then there are different degrees, different levels of this waking up. It could take the form of reading, imbibing some spiritual ideas. I can again give you the example, not from a Vedantic, historically speaking, not from a Vedantic standpoint, but from the experience of the pilgrim in the way of a pilgrim. We say again, it's a mystical tradition. He went to a church where he listened to the sermon by a priest on the first epistle of St. Paul's first epistle. maybe letters to Thessalonians, where St. Paul accidentally refers to a state of being, or rather being in a state of prayerfulness, spontaneously, without any effort. If you can always be in a state of prayerfulness, highest spiritual prayer with a lot of effort behind. And then I'm going to pray. But if you can live in a condition where we can't help being in a state of prayerfulness, that's the highest spiritual experience. He accidentally heard this sermon, and he had a strong desire to go to Jerusalem, so he started walking throughout Russia. The story is set in sometime in the middle of 19th century, before the emancipation of the serfdom in Russia. So he was barely literate. He wanted to go to days. He didn't, of course, go to Jerusalem later eventually. So that beginning was very accidental. He happened to listen to a sermon on St. Paul's epistle. So that could be the beginning of spiritual awakening. If you go to a library, if you read a book, that could also be a form of spiritual awakening. Another important aspect of spiritual awakening is you are never late, and at least bit of effort will be helpful. Important themes in the dialogue in Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna puts one of devotion, philosophy, the highest spiritual stuff, for yogas, everything. In the second chapter, which is a condensation of all these ideas. So in the 6th chapter, Arjuna, the disciple, puts one question to Krishna in the Gita. The question is very simple. Suppose you do a lot of spiritual practice, you read scriptures, you pray once a while, maybe you couldn't do that in a very regular way. Many people sometimes stumble upon in their job, duties, responsibilities. You take a decision, but you won't be able to do that. Often the conflict between mind and intellect. We want to do, but mind, emotions on the one hand, will on the other. Conflict. So here, Arjuna asks one question. Ayadi saddhayopedo yoga chalidamana saha aprapi yoga samsiddhim kam gadim krishna gach. This is a Sanskrit verse. The question is simple. What about those who practice spirituality, to do some spiritual practices, reading holy scriptures, meditating, praying once a while, discussing spiritual ideas, confessions and so on. But then they do not always succeed. Sometimes there is a fall, there is a deviation, conflicts, wrong associations can be a big problem. So there is stumbling. Falling by the wayside in our spiritual life. What happens to those people? This is the question that Arjuna asked Krishna. Simple question. The Krishna's answer is very simple. I am quoting only 2 verses. Tada naiveha namutra vinasastasya vidyade nahi kalyana gudkaschim durgadim tada gechadi. This is one verse. The most relevant verse is coming again. He says, look here, Arjuna, whatever little spiritual practice you do, it is praying once a while, or reading a scripture once a while, or sitting somewhere and thinking some holy thoughts, or associating with spiritual seekers. These are all different forms to get linked to some spiritual idea. By any means is a spiritual practice. That's what happened to the pilgrim in the way of a pilgrim. He accidentally happened to hear a sermon that is the beginning of spiritual awakening. But he didn't stop. He had to struggle hard. Similarly, Krishna says, whatever little effort you make, that will take you forward. But there is a problem. Suppose, and there are many people who may not succeed due to some very difficult, insurmountable problems and they die without reaching this spiritual illumination, so spiritual awakening. What happens to them? Not a journey that begins with the cradle and ends with a piece of stone in the cemetery. Death is only a semicolon or a comma. It is not a full stop. Life doesn't end when the body is pushed through the tube in the crematorium. That is only a semicolon, a comma. You'll be born again, and if you have just prayed once in this life, the desire to get out, that effort produces spiritual capital in the form of an inherent tendency to do spiritual practice. That's why sometimes we find great devotees. They listen to lectures, they do, then after some time you won't see them. Again you find them coming back. They may be due to obligations and duties and responsibilities. They may not get time, long distance, traffic, all that. But again, they have already deposited some spiritual wealth in the bank, a spiritual bank. Now, you can discern your money, but you cannot discern your own the result of action. You have prayed, pray for to get of that. That spiritual wealth will come to you, chasing you, and will help you to move forward in spiritual life. Because it's spiritual. So when we are born again, we continue our journey from where we are stopped in this life. So this concept of law of karma and the doctrine of rebirth are two important principles in understanding the concept of spiritual awakening. So, as a great promise, Lord Krishna makes a statement, Tatratam buddhi samyogam labhade paurodehikam yadadeja tado is a famous whole psychology of spiritual awakening is behind. Suppose as I said, we do some spiritual practice, we do not fully succeed in this life. What happens is, these ideas become tendencies and impressions, vasana, samskaras, in Sanskrit language used, tendencies and impressions, positive, spiritually healthy, helpful tendencies and impressions. They remain with us. That's a spiritual bank balance that we create through good actions, through good thoughts. It need not necessarily take the form of physical activities. Even a noble thought desire to do great things, some noble spirit, spiritual wealth, spiritual bank balance. Then what happens? When we are born again, we inherit this wealth, spiritual wealth. And that will help us to continue our journey forward, to take us further forward. So, spiritual awakening has got various stages. When we suddenly realize, due to some shocking experience, well, all that I did but didn't produce the expected result. So is this thing? That's the beginning of some kind of spiritual awakening. It may not straight away make you a Buddha, but will eventually take you to the track, to the road that Buddha took 2,600 years back. That's the importance of the statement. So, this maturing of spiritual wisdom, as I said, could have different levels, different layers of evolution. A sudden attraction towards a great spiritual idea. A strong desire to do noble deeds, to think noble thoughts. Even an interest in the spiritual way. Because spiritual awakening will eventually take us, as I said earlier, to the same road, same track, which a Buddha or a Christ or Shankaracharya or Sri Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, all of them took. Because the ancient track of the great spiritual leaders, they took this road and they reached their goal. So, as I said, spiritual awakening can come anytime. No effort is wasted. And another good news is that you are never late. Even there have been examples, devotees and philosophers. Some of them started their spiritual life when they were advanced in years. The transformation, the sudden jolt, jerk, sometimes even after they reached the 70th, 80th year. And that had a transformative effect on their life. So it's a very interesting topic. The idea, this concept is described in dozens of world spiritual classics. I have put some ideas forward in a matter of 45 minutes. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.